Chapter 6. Meet and Greet. The day of the Princess Merida meet and greet with the Voodoo Boys arrived. Rihanna helped me get dressed. All of the outfits I had made for myself were authentic, every detail replicated just the way it had been back in Thedas. I didn't use modern fabrics, methods, or shortcuts like zippers or auto-binding tech. This meant that the dresses were cumbersome when putting them on or taking them off, requiring someone else to help me with the laces and buttons. She also helped to lace the jewelry into my hair and secure the armor accents, which I had forged myself and wore with the outfits. Because this was a Princess Merida meet and greet, and they had requested each detail to be as close to the brain dance as possible, I put in contacts to make my eyes green. At age 12 in Thedas, I hadn't yet been blessed from the Titan, so my eyes hadn't gone blue. If they were as genuinely infatuated with the stories as I was led to believe, then I believed they would appreciate that little detail. It had been 2 weeks between my meeting with Rogue A today, so I had taken some time to make a few presents. I'd forged several brooches in the shape of House Orodum's sigil that I could hand out. The Voodoo Boys sent a limo for me. It was a sleek, black car without a driver. A line of white checkered squares ran across the middle of the body. The interior was white leather, actual white leather, not the fake stuff that you would typically find in high-end vehicles. As I slid into the back seat, a monitor flipped down from the ceiling, and the image of a bald man with white skin and blue lips, dressed in a white suit and black tie, appeared. A little chuckle escaped me. They had hired Delamain, a sentient AI who ran the city's largest cab company. "Ah, Miss Orodum! It is an honor to have someone of your notoriety with us today," Delamain said cheerfully. I smiled up at the monitor. "Thank you very much. It's a treat to be able to ride with you." The screen changed to show some information and a pre-programmed route. "You flatter me, miss. The client who paid for your ride has purchased the Excelsior package for you. You have access to all of my amenities. The client also went so far as to prepay any potential fines that might occur should you be discovered to have done any illegal drinking, drugs, or other activities while enjoying your ride." I couldn't help but laugh. They paid for drinks, huh? Considerate of them. "May I ask what other activities are available?" "Certainly, miss," Delamain replied as the car started on its way. Delamain knew precisely what he could and couldn't get away with. However, the one thing he never skirted around was traffic laws. That meant he never went over the speed limit, and was exceptionally cautious while traversing the city unless the vehicle was being attacked. Whenever he was driving normally, though, it meant you rode in style, but you wouldn't arrive at your destination quickly. If Fox or Rihanna had been driving, the trip to Pacifica might have taken a half hour, but with Delamain, it took nearly an hour. By the time the limo pulled up to the address in Pacifica that had been given to Delamain, I was fully relaxed and ready to put on a show. "I shall wait here for your return, Miss Orodum," Delamain said as he opened the door for me. "Good luck with your appearance." "Thank you, Delamain," I replied as I carefully exited the vehicle. There were a few representatives of the Voodoo Boys standing at the top of the stairs that led to the building's doors. One of them raised a hand to wave at me. "Miss Orodum?" I smiled up at the speaker. That would be me. "Is there a specific entrance you would prefer me to use? Or is there a schedule for the time I'm here?" The speaker simply nodded and motioned for me to follow. The group of them turned in unison and began to walk around to the side of the building. I had been given the contact info for their leader, but the only thing I had received after asking for information was a simple, "Everything is already arranged. All you have to do is show up." Even with more information requests, I kept getting the same response. I shouldn't have been surprised. The Voodoo Boys were a gang that preferred to wrap themselves in ambiguity and mystery. I shrugged and followed along. As I followed the group, I couldn't help but notice that Pacifica's streets were uncharacteristically busy. It was as if pedestrians were intentionally packing the sidewalks, bustling merchant stalls were especially noisy, and vagrants, loiterers, and minor groups hanging out were being overtly loud. It was as if the entire district was trying to make more noise than necessary. Even more curious, not one of them looked my way. Even if they didn't recognize me through my brain dances, someone my height dressed the way I was would certainly draw the attention of at least a few people. I was led to a side door and through a series of halls. To the gang's credit, they had cleaned the building top to bottom. The floors, walls, windows, and everything were all spotless. I had wanted the place clean, and there wasn't even a small stain or crumpled wrapper to be found. I even smelled fresh paint coming from some of the rooms. To my surprise, however, the one thing I didn't sense was electric code. There were no cameras, no speaking, no sensors to speak of. Sure, there were the standard electrical signals from power sources that normally flowed through a building. Electrical wiring, wireless signals, and the like. But no one and nothing was scanning me by standards means. However, I stopped in place as something demanded my attention. The group leading me stopped once they noticed I had stopped following them. They turned to look at me. "Is there something wrong?" the speaker of the group asked. Magic. I could feel it. I could sense it. It was like walking into a room and smelling your favorite meal. It hadn't been around until I was starting down the halls. Then it appeared. A simple scrying spell. Subtle. Masterful. Like a spy's side-eye, or a con man's tell. "Your leader isn't female," I said as I looked up at the speaker. "Where is he?" The small group looked at each other before the speaker looked down at me. "How do you know that?" I crossed my arms stubbornly. "Alan!" "Enough games, you gonk. Lugging me all the way here, making me dress up, all so we could meet? You could have just called me." The speaker's eyes glowed blue to indicate that they were getting a message. There was a minute before the speaker focused on me again. "Well, he's irritated now. If you head down the hall, you'll find an elevator. Hit the buttons for floors 1, 3, 3, 7. Then hit the close door button 4 times. I rolled my eyes. Leet? Really? I swear he never changes. I offered the group a curtsy and thanked them for leading me this far, then made my way down the hall. I input the code that had been given to me, and as the elevator started moving down, a voice came over the loudspeaker. "You suck. You know that?" It was Alan's voice. I laughed and shrugged. "It's your fault for using magic. If you had been fine with mundane methods of watching me, you would have been able to surprise me." He groaned. "You're joking with me. I figured you would have been too busy practicing your lines or something to notice." "Oh, please. You know how happy I am to be around magic." I shook my head. "If you honestly think I wouldn't notice it the first time I encountered it from a source other than myself, you really aren't giving me the credit I deserve." The elevator rang and stopped. The doors opened, and Alan was standing there, dressed in a long santan trench coat, its mandarin collar up, and its signal orange lining flashing at the lapels and hem like coated fire. Beneath the coat, matte blacks helped to quiet down the outfit. A plain tee, fingerless gloves, slim charcoal trousers muted things so the weight of his gold chains, hoops, and stacked rings could speak volumes. I smiled as he grinned down at me. He wasn't that much older than me. In fact, he looked the same way he had just after high school in our first life. So he had to be around 18 or 19. "You know, you could at least pretend to be surprised once in a while," he chuckled down at me. "Then maybe you should do something that surprises me," I said, my voice lowering to a whisper as I noticed what was behind him. The area the elevator had brought me to was a replica of the library of the Emilian College back in Thedas. The scent of polished wood, burning candles, and paper books. Real paper books filled the air. I lifted the skirt of my gown and stepped off the elevator, my boots thumping onto the wooden floor. "Alan, how did you..." His telltale cackle interrupted my question. What were you saying about doing something that surprises you? A quick series of steps brought me to the closest bookshelf. I ran my fingers down the spine of one of the books. It was a dry, faintly fuzzy buckram with a slight nap. The weave caught my fingertip, and the gilt title felt thin and flaking. This was a genuine antique that had to have been printed at least a century or more ago. I looked at the title and couldn't help but let out a little giggle. The Odyssey. I hugged the book to my chest and looked around, marveling at the library even as members of the Voodoo Boys walked to and fro through it. It was amazing, unlike anything I'd seen in lifetimes, and it was certainly the most unique thing I'd seen in this world so far. I exploited a lot of my knowledge, Alan said as he moved to my side. Businesses, wartime investments, historical information. It let me make some pretty Nova bank in just a few years. What I didn't know, I learned. Net running and code manipulation took me a bit, but once I got the hang of it, my abilities and the eddies I was bringing in helped me take the top spot in no time. He walked over to the side and scooped up a braindance wreath, waggling it at me. Imagine my surprise when, after building this place, it appeared in an amazingly popular braindance series. My cheeks grew pink with blush. I thought it would help make me some reliable eddies. No doubt, he smirked. I only wish I would have thought of it. I waved a dismissive hand. Oh, please. The series wouldn't have been as interesting following you around. I'm much cuter. He cackled and nodded. And you always grow up to be a short-stack dommy mommy. Still some of my most popular merch, I mumbled with slight irritation. I shook my head and looked up at him. So, you set up the meet and greet just to bring me here? He shrugged and motioned for me to follow him. Sort of. I was going to contact you sooner, but there was a project we were working on that I thought you might find interesting. I wanted to make sure it was ready before showing it to you. Oh? I replied, genuinely intrigued as I walked with him. You know, I like a good long-term project. What's it focused on? Nothing legal, he grinned down at me. I may have some legit income that pads my pockets, but the Voodoo Boys still have goals that don't exactly lie within the accepted parameters of the establishment. We walked through the library and through the back set of doors, where the rest of the building was something you would expect from an underground netrunner gang. It was dark, with bare cement floors and walls. To Alan's credit, he'd made sure there weren't any exposed wires or pools of stagnant collecting water from pipes leaking. We walked for a few minutes till we came to a large open hall where dozens of computer terminals were set up beside several large meat freezers. The freezers were full of water and ice with thick cables that plugged into their sides. Net diving? I asked as I looked at the freezers. It may surprise you, but I've seen this before. Alan smirked. Not this kind. We're going to the Black Wall. The Black Wall was a cyber firewall that held back sentient and feral AI from essentially consuming the world as we knew it. Going past the Black Wall was dangerous for humans. The AI locked away behind it were a mix of hyper-intelligent, feral, and aggressive, or simply insane. They vied for territory, prodded for openings into the live web, or generally stagnated in their quarantine. Humans sending themselves past the Black Wall could have their minds fried, their bodies taken over, or even accidentally allow some of the AIs into the network. The rewards for going beyond the Black Wall were as amazing as the process of getting them was dangerous. Diving into the right networks could help you find lost caches of account information for banks, corporations, or people. In this world especially, knowledge was power. Corporations paid ridiculous amounts of eddies or provided unbelievable resources to people willing to bring them information about other corporations from the Black Wall. Old net time dilation metrics, old net currency or utility token standards, AI provenance chains, pre-Black Wall global rootkit key, unpublished BIOS, or UEFI implants. The list was nearly endless. With enough bravery, luck, and caution, you could make a fortune slipping past the Black Wall. I balked at Alan. You had me put on one of my most expensive outfits that I made myself with authentic methods. And you expect me to jump into a pool of water and ice so I can go traipsing through the black wall? I figured you would bring a change of clothes, Alan shrugged. Why would I bring a change of clothes? I yelled. It was supposed to be a Princess Merida meet and greet. If I wore anything else, it would just be meeting the author. The whole thing is supposed to be me as Princess Merida from arrival to departure. Alan's lips pursed together as he considered my answer. You know what? That's actually, well, shit. I'm not sure how this will work. Then I sighed and shook my head. It's fine. I can access the loading node remotely. I'll just follow you in. I don't need a bath or ice. You realize what will happen to your core body temperature when you dive like this, right? Alan asked as he arched a brow. You realize I tank nuclear explosions as an afterthought, right? I countered, sticking out my tongue. You can still do that? He asked. You watched me? I groaned and rolled my eyes. You've seen me literally hatch dragons by standing in a giant bonfire. I'm fairly sure the heat from that is more than the body heat you're so worried about is ever going to come to. Besides, I'm not using the same method to access the net. Just trust me. Fine, Alan said as kept moving to the terminals. He nodded to one of the gang members who was preparing one of the terminals. It's just me in the bath. What about her? She's going to do her own thing, Alan replied as he took off his jacket. Just leave her to it. He took off his shirt and stripped down to his boxers. As he slipped into the freezing water, another attendant brought a headset for him to put on and plugged in a few cables into slots along his arm and back. You're sure you can go where I go? He asked as he looked over at me. I smiled and nodded to reassure him. Just waiting on you. Let's do it then, Alan told the member at the terminal. A moment later, I watched his connection flash through the electronic matrices. The connection, like other types of signals, moved at the speed of light. However, my new abilities allowed me to watch it slip through the cables at a leisurely pace, akin to a stroll. I stood in place, following his signal with my senses, until it came to a stop. Signals never stopped. They transferred back and forth constantly, from origin to destination, to continually relay feedback from one end to the other. When I figured out where he was, I slipped my consciousness into the network and followed him in.